Protests around the world over the last several days. And why does the U.S. seem so impotent?
What sparked the recent violence was the airing on the internet of a very hateful, very offensive video.
For the United States government to say that it was simply a spontaneous act flies in the face of the facts.
The way that the attack took place, I have serious questions. It seemed to be a military style, coordinated.
This leaves us with no doubt that this is pre-planned, predetermined.
It seems to me that it is well beyond coincidence that all of this happened in connection with September 11th.
I think people focus on the spark. The spark of reprehensible and irresponsible film is a spark, but it's not. It doesn't explain anything.
It's approximately a reaction to this video, and it's a hateful video.
They are destroying the American economy. Foreign policy is an embarrassment. We weren't prepared for attacks on our embassies on 9/11, blaming it on a YouTube video.
It was planned, definitely it was planned by foreigners, by people who entered the country a few months ago. And they were planning this criminal act since their arrival.
These protests that are sweeping are not because people are watching this movie, but are hearing about it.
It could not be spontaneous.
Human rights, they're against the rights of women, they're against freedom of religion, they're against freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They're against all the things that we value.
President Obama needs to get his priorities straight. What he needs to do is cancel his interview with David Letterman, cancel his meeting with Beyonce, cancel his meeting with Jay-Z, and instead agree to meet with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu.
The effect of it has to reflect, I think, a rejection of the foreign policies of the administration.
The glaring incompetence for anybody willing to spend more than 5 minutes looking, the path takes you right to the White House.
Stephen Hadley, National Security Advisor George W. Bush, is here to go on the record. Stephen, the murders in Libya, spontaneous or premeditated?
Probably some of both. I think one of the things that's clear is it was an opportunity, and it was an opportunity taken advantage of by Salafist and extremist groups to demonstrate against the United States and do more than just demonstrate against the United States because they are anti-American. But also it was an opportunity for them to put pressure on some more moderate governments in terms of their spectrum, of which they are not a part, to put pressure on those governments to force them to move more against the United States and to undermine those governments because it knows that those governments are cooperating with the United States because the United States is important for them to, those governments, to achieve a better life for their people. And I think also the longer this goes, the more we find out about it, the better the chance that in at least some of these instances Al-Qaeda was active as well. I don't know that. My hunch is, you know, when people show up to demonstrations with, you know, anti-tank weapon with RPGs, this is not a spontaneous uprising. This is some people who are taking advantage of an opportunity to kill Americans.
When this over the past 3 or 4 days, it's, you know, well, we've, you know, I don't think the 4 who've been killed even been buried. There's now an autopsy going on. Is the obsession has been whether it was provoked by the video or not. The administration is, you know, is out there in front, says provoked by the video. What is the reason that they're fixated on that?
I don't know. I think provoked. I think pretext provided an opportunity. It's clearly been taken advantage of by a lot of factions, and I think you've seen some people in the press talk about this. Taken advantage of by extreme groups to put pressure on governments to separate themselves from the United States. That's the agenda.
What is it? I mean, the bottom line is that we have hostile situations in a number of countries. They're burning our flag. This is not a good situation, and yet everyone sort of is fixated on whether it's the video or not.
I can't explain it. And I also think we need to step back and say it is a very serious situation in itself, but it is part of a broader situation in the region, which I think is extremely serious, and it starts really in Syria, which is increasingly becoming a forum for a sectarian war between Sunni and Shia that risk destabilizing Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, and even Turkey, and runs the risk of sectarian warfare that engulfs the Middle East. And it is urgent, it is serious, and the administration does not seem to have a policy that is commensurate with the seriousness of the problem and the rapidity of the events. And at the same time, in terms of Iran, Iran continues to move towards a nuclear weapon, and we seem to spend more time putting pressure on Israel not to strike Iran than figuring out what we're going to do about Iran. So I think it's a troubling time. This is a Middle East that's in meltdown, and our policies seem to be, in some sense, frozen. And the administration talks about how they have more time. I think we're running out of time, and I'm worried about it.
How do we unwind ourselves out of this situation? I mean, we've got the, no matter why it happened, we now have this situation, and it is a crisis. What do we do?
Well, one of the things we don't do is we don't pull out. Because these people who are demonstrating against us, that's exactly what they want to do. They want us to pull out and clear the space for their more radical agenda. So I think one of the things we need to do is we need to be more engaged. We need to help those governments that legitimately are trying to bring political and economic reform to their people and try to help them succeed and deal with some of the frustration that they have. And then we need to deal more aggressively with this deteriorating situation in Syria, and again with the clock that is ticking in Iran. So I think what we don't do is withdraw. What we do need to engage with some imaginative and more ambitious policies, because we have a lot at stake here, we have a lot of interests here, and we need to be active in protecting those interests.
Well, Egypt is certainly very important to Israel in the Middle East, and you've got the situation where President Morsi this weekend received President Bashir of the Sudan. Both the Muslim Brotherhood put both of them in office. That doesn't look like President Morsi is leaning towards trying to sort of put the lid on problems if he's meeting with a fellow Muslim Brotherhood president who incidentally is under indictment for genocide, and he should have him arrested in his country and turned over to the ICC.
Look, Bashir is a bad guy, and I can't explain or excuse his meeting with him. I wasn't a fan of his going to Iran, though when President Morsi did go to Iran, he denounced them for their policy on Syria in very forthright terms. That's a good thing. He's obviously trying to find his way. This is a problematic government, but it is the government that the Egyptian people elected. I think, therefore, we have no alternative but to work with that government, but not in an unconditional way. I think what we need to do is make clear we're prepared to work with these governments, even Muslim Brotherhood-led governments, as long as they are prepared to bring their country to economic and political reform, establish inclusive political systems where everyone is able to participate, individual rights are respected. If that is the future, we think it's the future their people want. If that's the future they're bringing to their people, we're prepared to cooperate in that. But we ought to be clear that that's the kind of Middle East we think is best for us, but also best for the people in the Middle East.
Thanks, Steve. Obviously a very dangerous situation. Thank you. Anti-American outside our Indonesian embassy. They're burning flags and shouting, "We will destroy America like this flag." So far on the record is tracking anti-American protests in 27 countries: Libya, Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Nigeria, Sudan. And then moving east to Yemen, Lebanon, Israel, the West Bank, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and the protests continuing further east to Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, and even radical Muslim groups in the United Kingdom and Australia have hit the streets. This is spreading fast. Liz Cheney, former State Department official, is here to go on the record. And actually, at the State Department, you worked covering this region, right?
I did. That's right, Greta.
Your thought tonight?
Well, I think that Steve is right when he talks about the importance of looking at the overall policy here. You know, my sense of what happened in Libya, I watched Ambassador Rice yesterday say with 100% certitude that this was all because of the movie, and I found that to be preposterous. I mean, I think that if you know, at a minimum, you've got to say, we don't know yet. We don't know yet exactly what the spark was, but what we do know points pretty clearly to al-Qaeda involvement into pre-planning here. You know, some reports had us at a 4-hour firefight, RPGs, mortar rounds. Those aren't the things that happen if this is spontaneous because of the movie.
Well, as you see this whole area implode, it's profoundly distressing. We actually took on the record to Cairo in June of 2009 when the president gave his speech talking about a new beginning. Obviously, this has now imploded all around us in the sense that, I mean, American employees in these embassies, frankly, just aren't safe. We know that we've had 4 murders.
Right. Well, and I think that that speech in Cairo had a lot of language in it that helps you understand part of the problem here. What we're seeing is a clear failure of Obama administration policy in the Middle East. But this is a president who spent many speeches, especially throughout the course of 2009, apologizing for America. He did it in that speech in Cairo. He said that after 9/11, we abandoned our ideals. He went onto foreign soil and really slandered, I think, the people who were running the government then and the men and women who kept us safe after 9/11. But it's this notion somehow that American strength is provocative. And I think when you look at the message that we've sent across the Middle East, this notion that we're pulling out, this notion that our enemies need not fear us, the Iranians make steady progress towards a nuclear weapon, and this administration's been either unwilling or unable to stop them. On all fronts, basically, America is retreating, and you see what happens when America is not in a position of strength.
But we couldn't stay here in these places forever. And you see in Afghanistan and Iraq, 2 countries where we went in to those countries, as we pull out, they apparently didn't want us there. I mean, there's an enormous amount of violence in both those places as we pull out.
I think you've got to differentiate. I think in Iraq, when President Bush left office, we in fact left a situation that this president could have built on to have the kind of secure and stable environment that, frankly, you know, we had anticipated. The war was ending. President Obama decided not to push too hard to negotiate any kind of a stay-behind agreement. And so you've now got Iran ascendant in Iraq with no American presence there. Afghanistan, a completely different situation where the president from the very beginning started announcing a timetable for withdrawal, said, okay, I'll surge, but we're not going to give 2 complete fighting seasons. Sending the message, it's complete common sense. You don't have to be, a brain surgeon here to understand that when you tell the enemy, listen, we're going to surge, but we're out of there by this date certain, the enemy's going to sit back and wait. And in a situation that is as dangerous as those 2 countries are, for our allies to feel that they don't have a strong partner, it's going to be very difficult for them to stand up with us. So I would say what's happening today in Iraq and Afghanistan, both, in addition to what's happening across the region, are in many ways a direct result of this administration's policies.
Let me ask you the same question I asked Steve. What do we do now? In light of the fact that this is a situation we have, if you were president, what would you do?
Well, I'd say number one, we're going to absolutely bring justice for the deaths of those 4 Americans, and it's going to be swift and it's going to be severe. Number 2, I would cancel the loan forgiveness for the Egyptian government. I would put it on hold right now. I think it's very important for us to work particularly with the Egyptian military, but for the president of Egypt to have stood by and watched our embassy be overrun, our flag be burned, the al-Qaeda flag posted.
And he's chumming around with the president of Sudan this weekend, who in most countries are obliged to turn him over under indictment. I mean, the guy's slaughtered thousands. He's still slaughtering right now.
No, I think that, the military assistance ought to be part of a larger, longer discussion. The $1 billion loan forgiveness ought to be canceled immediately. And I would make clear we are standing with the government of Israel and that we will not allow nuclear capability in Iran. And I would be asking for military plans right now to know what to do to stop that program.
Well, Prime Minister Netanyahu certainly is, this weekend made it known where he stands.
Yeah, that's exactly right.